Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, which is on an introduction to digital artwork and graphic design software. And this week's guest is David Haynes, the managing partner at Corel Trainer. How's it going, David?
Beautiful. How about yourself, Zach?
It's Good Friday, so you can't really complain when it's Friday and it's Good Friday. So
It
sun
is a
is
good
shining
Friday.
and nice Easter weekend coming. Um, and yeah, excited to talk about, digital artwork. We're in an industry where the barriers of entry are very low, David, and most of us start as a mom and pop shop in our garage or our basement. And the biggest hurdle is really artwork. I mean, it's most of us don't have a design or just artwork manipulation background, and we're often overwhelmed. I mean, and it's just the biggest hurdle. It's the biggest hurdle for every order. Get artwork ready for production. It's the biggest learning curve out of everything in the industry is learning about artwork. So I'm excited to do this session with you and also talk a little bit about what Corel Trainer is all about and how they can help a shop get started easier by having the support. So, David, let's just dive into it.
Let's dig in.
Artwork. I mean, we have a lot of different decoration processes and pieces of equipment in the industry. And what you're not going to do is you're not going to just take a sketch design and then all of a sudden have it printed on a shirt or have it engraved or sublimated. We need to digitally create it. So that artwork needs to be on a computer using design or editing programs. And there's two big players in this realm, and they've been the big two us for decades, and that is Corel Draw Suite. So Corel Draw, this is actually my first piece of software I ever got in the industry
Wow.
15 years ago. So when I bought a heat press, I bought a vinyl cutter, a Roland GS24, and they actually included Corel Draw with the piece of equipment because they knew you can have this equipment, but if you have no way to get the artwork ready to send to the cutter, it's not going to do anything, and so Corel Draw actually came with my first piece of equipment. It was the first piece of software that I really had to learn, and again, that's GX4. So they definitely have had some updates and so forth to it, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. So we have Corel Draw, and Corel Draw has a big suite, but the main thing that they have, David, correct me if I'm wrong, is actually Corel Draw itself. Correct?
Correct. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely correct.
In Corel Draw, it's vector based software, correct?
CorelDRAW is vector-based, and even in CorelDRAW itself, you don't really necessarily need photo paint for this industry. So you're 100% right, Zach. Mostly everybody just uses the full-blown graphic suite.
Okay. And then the other big player is Adobe. And Adobe has, again, their own suite with a lot of different programs, but there's two that really stand out, and that is Photoshop and Illustrator. So Adobe, um, again, they've been around for decades. Their two main programs, Photoshop is meant for bitmap manipulation. So again, your raster images, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Whereas Illustrator is your vector-based program. And they're very powerful. But that power comes with, the Spider-Man responsibility of having this giant learning curve. And now you have to learn two different programs. So Corel Draw kind of keeps it all under one umbrella, one main piece of software that's very powerful. Adobe has two sets, and again, most shops have to learn both, which has, again, its drawbacks. Um, Before we keep, going more into the different types of programs, let's define what the most important, kind of key terms when it comes to digital artwork, and that is Is it a vector file? Is it a bitmap, also referred to as a raster file image? So, Dave, I'll let you kind of explain the difference between a raster and a vector.
Perfect. So I can't tell you how many times I explain this, and it just, you see light bulbs go everywhere. Okay. So if I take a picture of you and I blow it up, any normal person that uses a cell phone, you zoom into a picture, it gets all pixelated, it gets blurry. That's because it's built with millions of little dots, millions of little dots. Okay. A vector is built with solid lines. So you can blow a vector image up the size of a convention center if you wanted to, and it would have the same resolution or look the same as if it was the size of your pinky nail. So uh, raster, you're also pretty limited on what type of editing and coloring that you can do. Vector is fully editable, and it is the ideal files that you want to be using.
Yep, and so the way I was first taught is, like vectors actually using geometry. If you think about it, it's all
Yeah.
just points and shapes. And like you said, Dave, you can essentially grab any part of the design and do something with it. You can remove that color, you can scale it, you can change the color very easily.
Yep.
Versus when you have those pixels, at some point, if you really zoom in, you're going to see blending of colors, which makes it pretty much impossible to identify this is one color, this is the next color that's next to it. Bitmaps have that medium in between, and it makes it very difficult to, or essentially almost impossible to color separate. And again, if you go to stretch it, you're asking for dots and pixels to stretch. It's not using geometry lines and curves to actually do it. Um, and that's why a lot of decoration processes really need a vector file like screen printing. Most screen printing, each color in the design is printed individually,
Yep.
meaning we need to be able to separate those colors. Trying to separate the colors from this raster image versus this vector, you can instantaneously see it'd be very easy to grab that white, black, that green, dark brown, light brown. I see 5 simple colors. If I looked at the raster, it's probably going to spit out like 20 colors because there's a bunch of pixels, in between creating that image. Uh,
Exactly.
so yeah, it uh, very, very important. Dave, I don't know how often you hear this, but just because it's a transparent file or image doesn't mean it's a vector. uh, Vectors have specific file formats we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And don't think just because you have a vector that all of a sudden it's good to go, because you can convert a bitmap to a vector, but it needs to be done right because just having a vector file isn't good enough. So David, talk to us a little bit about the main functions of a vector design program like CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator.
So as far as CorelDRAW goes, I know a little bit about Adobe, but it's just not really the primary tool for this industry. So I will dig into the Corel side of things. You can prep your artwork, for screen printing. You can optimize it for embroidery, meaning delete all the unnecessary nodes before you digitize it. I highly recommend viewing things in wireframe after you vectorize it, because you will absolutely sometimes see, some stuff that you didn't really see on your enhanced view. So I recommend to all my clients view in wireframe before you send to your vinyl cutter, um, before you do any type of production. It will save you some time and headache too. But I'm not gonna lie, there really isn't anything you can't do with vector artwork in CorelDRAW. There just isn't. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. And again, like you were saying, um, one of the main things is, okay, I've got a bitmap file and now I want to convert it to a vector. I want to take it from using a bunch of dots and pixels and turn it into a file with lines and curves. And now I can separate colors and do other things that specific decoration processes require. And then backgrounds, somebody, a JPEG, very common file format. JPEGs pretty much are always going to have a background.
Yep.
Um, and sometimes you don't even need to necessarily vectorize the file. You just don't want that white background in there. And CorelDRAW, Adobe Illustrator have the tools to allow you to remove it. Now there's other, even Photoshop can somewhat remove a background, but yeah, vector files or vector design programs like CorelDRAW and Illustrator really are what you want to use um, to do these. And then, like you
Yep.
said, view the wireframes, cut lines. Um, for those who don't know, the wireframes, essentially you're removing all of the colors and so forth from the design, and you just like see the nodes, the points and the curves. And like you're saying, David, it's real easy. Before you know it, you don't realize that there's a line that goes through everything. And if you were to cut it or engrave it, it's going to be kind of a useless decoration because you missed that extra line there.
And I will say that CorelDRAW, I do have to say CorelDRAW has a pretty good feature that removes backgrounds automatically without having to mess around too, too much with it. I can take a 72 DPI logo, do a low quality image trace on it, remove the background or an individual color that I specify myself, hit the OK button, and it does it for you really fast.
Wow. And since signed up, since I received my, version 4 of CorelDRAW, there's been a lot of updates over the past 15 so years, right?
There really has. There really has. It's came leaps and bounds. You know, before I'm not gonna lie. I think Illustrator was definitely more powerful than CorelDRAW. I will say in the last 5 years, CorelDRAW has definitely surpassed it for this industry.
And you make a great point there for our industry.
Yep.
Most shops are not looking to be a graphic artist and be designing something from complete scratch. Most shops need to take the customer's artwork and get it ready to send to the equipment to then decorate with.
Yep.
And so you're manipulating artwork, not designing new artwork very often. And you just bring up a great point because while Adobe has a lot of great bells and whistles, it's more for designing something from scratch, not so much manipulating. And it just has all these great tools that are complete overkill and very difficult to learn versus what you actually need to know is
Yeah.
very very few things that'll make your life a lot easier, and then you can keep going from there. But yes, it's it doesn't matter how powerful something is if it takes you years to learn, and even then it's still overkill for what you
For
need
what we do.
in your day-to-day business operations. So vector file, and here's like an example of a vector. Is even though it has some shading and things in here, David, I can clearly identify colors and so forth. Now these vector files, and it does get a little confusing, David, because some file names can both be a vector and a bitmap. Technically a PDF, you could save a file as a PDF and it still could be a bitmap, not a vector. Um, but CDR, I mean, technically, could you take a bitmap into CorelDRAW, save it as a CorelDRAW file, and it's a CDR file, but it's not actually a vector. Is that true?
Well, you can because CDR is essentially the native file of CorelDRAW, just like your .ai is your native file for Adobe Illustrator. So each are particularly exclusive to CDR, Corel, AI, Adobe. It does get tricky when you bounce back and forth. You try and open a CDR file in Adobe, or you try and open a AI file in CorelDRAW. We could spend a lot more time on that one, but they are each very unique to their own software.
Yep. And then so you have those native files, which don't guarantee that it's a vector format, obviously,
Mhm.
because again, you could be in the middle of creating that vector, but it's that native. PDF, SVG, EPS. These are the three most common vector file formats. And they all kind of, while they're all vectors using lines and curves, they have pros and cons to each. And not to go get all technical, and a lot of it goes over my head, but a PDF may have more additional information in it than an SVG, or have certain editing capabilities. Um, but most of the time, if you're ever going to ask your customer for a vector format, ask them, hey, we want your logo in a PDF, SVG, or EPS vector. Now, the problem is, David, even your bigger clients who have well-established businesses, you ask them for a vector, and they're still going to give you a bitmap 90% of the time. So, you want to ask your customers for the ideal, format. Again, one of these vectors, and then just understand most likely they're going to give you a JPEG or a PNG, and you're going to have to do the work for them. It'll always be the biggest hurdle in the custom decoration industry is getting artwork ready to, again, decorate with. And your customer rarely gives you the correct format to begin with. But the good news is once you create that vector for the customer, you have it.
Exactly.
They shouldn't be changing
Exactly.
their logo too often. And David, I bet you have a lot of clients who actually offer it as a service to their customers, because you can go to them like, hey, you need a vector. You're going to decorate, there's going to be somebody who needs your logo for something, and you don't want to be giving them this pixelated image to then show. I mean, it always kills me, David, when I'm watching, a TV or commercial or see something printed for advertisement, and they clearly started with a low resolution, and who knows how much money they spent. It's like somebody
Yep.
couldn't clean this up first before you spent so much money. So vector files. The most popular decoration process in the industry for printing apparel is screen printing. Um, there's obviously some digital processes that are becoming very popular, but screen printing will always be a go-to. Uh,
Yes, it will.
and David, there's a couple different ways that you can screen print. We have what's called spot color printing and process printing. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit, but the majority of screen printing is considered spot color printing, meaning each color in the design has its own screen. So because each color has its own design, we need to be able to separate those colors very easily. And that's why we require a vector file format for screen printing. So we can separate the colors and then also manipulate each color so that we trap colors next to one another. When you have two colors next to one another, it can be very difficult to align up. But when you have a vector file, you can start creating traps and so forth in which colors barely overlay so that there's never the potential of that little gap, and you'll be invisible to the human eye, that little overlay. So screen printing, they definitely want a vector file. It's technically possible sometimes for a bitmap, but it's so rare you just want to tell your I need a vector. So screen printing, heat transfer vinyl. And cutting vinyl is less popular today than it was 15 years ago, especially with the digital processes. But again, there's a reason that Roland included this when I bought my first machine, because Dave, we got to cut the media. So the blade has to know where to come down and cut. It has to be a vector, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where you'll set your cut lines. And we go back to the wireframe deal, when it comes to vinyl. always view it in wireframe, of course, uh, but it's it's just the best file types and the best type of artwork. It's more universal. And going back to what you were saying as far as switching the artwork from a bitmap to a vector, clients don't like paying art fees. You know, um, they just don't. So it's your job if you're in this industry to know how to make that vector as fast as you possibly can. And it's not necessarily your client's fault. They're just uneducated. They
Yep.
don't realize that you can't print or cut a 72 DPI logo. So you really got to get efficient no matter what program you guys decide to use.
No, you're absolutely right. And Dave, there is always a digitizing fee for embroidery. It's always standard. Again, I talk to hundreds of shops throughout a year. It is extremely rare that I ever see somebody work their digitizing fee into the actual decoration price.
Yep,
When it comes to vector, you pretty much you rarely charge the customer because every order would have that little artwork fee, and you kind of just build it into your price and assume that you're not going to get the good stuff from the customer off the bat. But again, we're in an industry where we're looking to work with a lot of clientele. Vectorize their logo one time, you've got it for the lifetime of the customer. So um,
exactly.
vinyl cutting, very much so. Pad printing. Pad printing is very popular with promotional products. So it's very similar to screen printing, where each color in the design needs to have its own essential stencil created. So I need to separate the colors. That's why pad printing requires a vector. Engraving. Engraving really wants a vector. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, David?
Engraving definitely loves vectored artwork. It just really does because that's the path that your laser is going to follow. There is different ways to laser engrave in Corel 2. You can use a vector. You also can convert digital photos to grayscale. You know, Grayscale
Yes.
is a completely different ball game there, and we can go deeper into that down the road. But definitely primarily vector. That's why Epilogue, the only thing they use is CorelDRAW. It's the tool
Yeah.
for engraving. It's just the best one, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's like looking at equipment. There's no such thing as one piece of equipment. Well, there is, but every piece of equipment has a time and place. There's different. It's just like a contractor. You have different tools in your tool belt. There's a hammer is used to do one thing, a screwdriver is used to do another. You can technically hammer a nail with the screwdriver. You can technically try to spin a screw with a hammer, but it's not the right tool. Um, so yeah, it very much so here. Patches, David. A lot of patches. They start with a mold, and if you're going to create a mold for a patch, I mean, again, it depends on what patch we're talking about. You got to have a vector. Um, embroidery. Embroidery doesn't have to start with a vector, but it's gonna get you a lot closer, and it's gonna just be a lot less work for the digitizer to have to create it. And also, like you said, um, you often want to manipulate the artwork before you send it to digitizing because not every piece of detail can be obtained with embroidery.
Correct.
So, being able to have the tools to manipulate, very, very much so important. Okay, now bitmaps. What I don't want anybody to think is that bitmaps are not as good as vectors. That's not necessarily the case. It's just, it's not the best thing to use for all of the different decoration processes we just mentioned. A lot of new processes revolve around using digital print heads, CMYK. And because of that, we're not separating colors. It's not a cut or an engraved line that we're actually following to create the design. It's using digital print heads just like an inkjet printer at home does. So there is a lot of you don't always have to have a vector file to decorate something, but that you also definitely need to understand how to manipulate these bitmap raster images, because you can do things to it to create really cool effects. I mean, there's things you can do with vectors that you can't do with bitmaps, and vice versa. And Dave, you brought it up before. What's the fancy coin term from Photoshop? It's been photoshopped,
Yep.
and that's
Photoshop.
what you can do with bitmap programs, which I find it really interesting that Corel Draw has, again, those tools that both that you would have to be using Illustrator and Photoshop, but Corel allows you to do both. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we actually just did, oh my gosh, a 80-minute class in Dax, Minnesota on using bitmaps in CorelDRAW or digital photos. You can mess with brightness, contrast, intensity. Once again, there's nothing you can do in Corel that you can't do in Adobe. There's nothing in Adobe that you can't do in Corel. Corel just does it faster for this industry. Um, there's a lot more support behind it too.
Well, I mean, again, I've got a screenshot here of Photoshop. You see every one of these little tools, then they've got like 4 tools within it, and then you've got a whole nother navigation up. It's crazy overkill when there's probably like 5 general things I may ever do with it. And yeah, but like you just said, David, with a bitmap file, again, often referred to as a raster, you can make adjustments to like the brightness, the saturation, the contrast. You can make it a grayscale. You could remove a background. You could remove colors, maybe not perfectly remove colors like you could a vector. Um, and it allows you to do some simple cropping and selecting.
Mhm.
So, you can, uh, most of these things, though, you don't want to be drastically changing yourself because it's not necessarily what your customer thought it was going to look like. Cropping something simple, removing a background, yeah, maybe. What you also have to be, I always worry a little bit about, David, is we could make adjustments and then send it back to the customer, but their monitor, views it very differently than yours does. So that's why it's often best to take what the customer gives you and try to run with that and not manipulate it, because then they start pointing the finger. Um, you did this to my image.
And then you're
Um,
not getting paid for your art time still. So
no, no. Um, so bitmap file format. So again, if you look at this, this is like a photo. You absolutely could print this. I could print this on a mouse pad. It would look awesome, using a digital printing method. There's nothing saying that, if this was a vector and I wanted to sublimate print it, that a vector would have been better. No, not necessarily. I didn't need to remove colors. I didn't need a cut line on it. It works without any issues. So your main native format for bitmaps would be PSD for Photoshop. And then your most common file formats for a bitmap raster image really are PNG and JPEG. And PNGs can be transparent. David, JPEGs cannot be transparent. Is that correct?
you're always going to have that white background on your JPEGs.
Okay, that's what I thought. And what's different though about again, PNG can be transparent, but just so you realize, PNG files have a much larger size to them. If you
Correct.
had a PNG and a JPEG of the exact same artwork saved at the exact same resolution, that JPEG is going to be a lot smaller of a file size than that PNG.
Correct.
Um, okay, so what decoration processes can take a bitmap? It's not that they prefer a bitmap, but can print a bitmap. Direct to garment. So it's really all these digital decoration methods. So direct to garment, direct to film, white toner heat transfers, sublimation, UV, so ultraviolet, eco solvent. So all of your decoration processes that have CMYK or some other type of digital print head setup, they can print a bitmap. But again, that doesn't mean that they don't want a vector.
Yep.
And just because you have a bitmap doesn't mean they're all created equal. Just like a vector, it better be traced correctly. Just if it's not, then it's not good.
Yep.
So how do we judge a good bitmap file for decoration? David, it comes down to the resolution, correct?
Exactly. Yes, it's all in the resolution. And in Corel, you can bump up resolution or drop it down too. There's many different ways, but you'll be able to see the resolution on your top left.
Well, it's kind of funny that you said you can bump down because that is something where it's kind of coming back. Can you take? I'd like this design, but in a 16-bit, look to it, and a bunch of like blocks. So, yeah. And if you look at this photo here, on one side the lake looks very clear. So the other side it looks fuzzy. So resolution, David, what exactly are we talking about here?
Essentially, pixels, dots, blending. We can get really deep into it, but the easiest way to explain it is just clarity. The higher the resolution, the more clear your image is going to be. I have a bunch of clients that will drop down DPI, which is dots per inch, in order to vectorize something. Things do vectorize a lot easier when you do drop
Okay.
your resolution.
And so the more dots you have, the less like blending there is. Um, so it just gets you that cleaner image. I mean, it's funny. Back 15 or so years ago, it was all about how many megapixels does your digital camera, this is before you had a smartphone, have, and then it just kept going up, and I was like, we got this one has 10 megapixels, yeah. Now we're like way past all of that, and you look at the 4K, 8K, and it's very similar to what you see on a screen, right? Like if you're watching
Mhm.
TV, the standard definition versus high definition, you have more dots creating that image, and the more there is, the more clarity there's going to typically be. Um, Shrinking down an image, David, not an issue, right? We're not,
Mhm.
we're compressing uh, those pixels, not a big deal, but expanding, not good.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, just don't do it. You can't
Don't do
do it. So, um, I kind of mentioned before, technically a bitmap can sometimes be used, um, even for like screen printing. So if you designed something as a bitmap, which you really shouldn't design something as a bitmap if it's going to be screen printed, but if
right.
you started in there and you had a one color transparent design and it is at 300 DPI or higher, and it is at the exact size it's going to be decorated at, we don't need to expand it. If we don't have, if it's sharp already, you can use that. I mean, it's technically usable. Um, so just very important whenever you're dealing with, a bitmap, just know you can't be expanding it. I mean, that's the biggest limitation right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, here's something that can be definitely confusing. So RGB, red, green, blue, are three colors that can be used to create almost any color. And then with the digital printing equipment, again, just like your inkjet or laser printer at home, it uses four colors to create as many colors as it can. Cyan, yellow, magenta, and K is represented, it's black. So CMYK is what most digital printers use. RGB is really just a working format. Um, so if you're not going to print something, let's say you're designing something for a website or really just anything that's going to be shown on a screen, you want to be using RGB format because it has a wider color spectrum. Is color spectrum the right word there, David?
That's the word that I would use. Color profiles, you know.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot more colors out there than CMYK.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black are used with most digital printing uh, methods. Now, I hear a lot of conflicting things about this, and anytime I hear so much confliction, I never know what is really right. And what I know is what I know. But whenever my staff gets artwork and we're going to send it to the printer, we never convert it from RGB to CMYK. We let the digital printer do that. So if we're going to direct a garment, direct a film, sublimate, really any of those CMYK printing methods, we work in RGB, and then the RIP software right before it sends the artwork to the machine converts it to the CMYK profile to actually decorate the design. It's not really a good idea to design in CMYK because your colors will not really look correct. So it's kind of funny. I read a lot of things like you should design in CMYK, and it's like, I don't think so because I've never seen that actually work well. Can be a little confusing at times, and it also comes down to your equipment and your RIP software. But the important thing to take away, David, is RGB has a larger color spectrum versus CMYK. And what I find to be really interesting about a lot of the newer digital printers is they're starting to introduce additional colors on top of the CMYK. So you have cyan, yellow, magenta, and black, and that's a 4-color process print. And then you could actually add light cyan and light magenta. Those two little extra colors starts opening up the color gamut to be more similar to the RGB. You're able to nail specific colors better than just using the 4. And now I started seeing some machines with green and orange. So it's very confusing to me how these different pieces of software are able to rip the design that was sent and change it to be there. But we're able to trick the eye with more colors we use to create the any color. And this
That's
kind of
why
leads us,
RIP software is awesome.
yeah. I again, you can't you can't do it yourself. Uh, and this leads us straight into spot printing versus process printing. So spot printing, every piece of artwork in a design is easily identifiable. So, just even my logo here, one color, two colors. It's extremely simple to identify them. Look at the here, spot one, two. And then we have, again, something else, like we said earlier, each color in the design um, is going to have its own ink or thread or media. So screen printing primarily does spot. Embroidery, it's primarily spot. Now there's some new technology that's made it, some things possible, but it's really a spot. Vinyl cutting, it's a spot. Each color that you would cut with vinyl has to be cut one at a time. And then like engraving, you're only doing one line at a time, essentially. Um, versus process printing. So process printing, again, is all of those digital printing methods, the CMYK and so forth. So even coming back to the Corel Draw, this is more of a process design, a print. It's a bunch of blending of colors. Could you technically make a different screen for all 200 colors? Yeah, you could.
A
But
lot of work.
really, it'd be a lot of work. And that's why, like, I don't want to confuse anybody. Screen printing absolutely can use process. So you can with screen printing use CMYK, you have to, again, create your color separations using RIP software, and there's a bunch of dots, halftones. It gets real intricate, but it's totally possible. And there's even such thing, David, as spot process printing. So you could use the CMYK to create all these different colors, but then maybe you have a big corporate client who is adamant that look, whatever color is used for their logo is their actual Pantone color. So if you've ever heard Pantone or PMS color, PMS stands for Pantone Mixing System. Pantone essentially, how do I explain this, David, other than they have set the standard for every color for every industry virtually, right? I mean, I don't care what industry you're in. If you, whatever your brand is, you can't just say, hey, it's red. No, 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 no. We need an actual identifier so that
Mhm.
everybody can be on the same page as to what that exact color is supposed to be. So Pantone has been around for decades. They are essentially the dictionary for colors.
Pantone's a massive deal, and I do remember last year at PPAI Las Vegas in January, something happened with Pantone and Adobe. They were in cahoots for a little bit there. I don't know if you heard anything there, but you couldn't use the Pantones in Adobe. Our booth was slammed with people. I don't care how much it is. Can I use Pantones in Corel? If yes, here's my credit card. Um, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa! I'm not going to sell it to you like that if you don't know fully what you're buying yet. But Pantone is really where it's at as far as your colors go.
Yeah, and again, any of your bigger corporate client, I mean, they're going to not request, they're going to demand that
Mhm.
that color be exactly the same. And yeah, you just very, very important. And that's why a lot of the times you need to actually have more than just CMYK, or you need the spot process capability so that you can screen print or however else to get that exact color, because the four digital colors are not going to be close enough.
Yep.
So if you're looking at this image, you have the CMYK blending together. And then if you look at it in a different way, these are potentially the different colors that you would actually call out. And so Pantone has numbers, and then will be either a C for coded or a U for uncoded. And that uncoded kind of has the matte look versus the coded has it. Um, every shop that does any spot color screen print, really any screen printer, I'm not saying every process, you really want to have a Pantone book. They're not cheap, but it allows you to make sure that you're matching the color up exactly, because it's very important. Color is very important to your customer.
Yeah.
All right, now David, we went over what is a vector, what is a bitmap. Very important. That is the hardest thing for a lot of new shops to wrap their head around when they're just getting started. Um, we went over the different types of graphic design programs, the two big ones being Corel Draw and Adobe, which has Photoshop and Illustrator, how the different programs work as far as separating colors, removing backgrounds, making adjustments to the contrast, color saturation, grayscale, why it's a good idea to start with RGB color mode when you're designing something or you're prepping it, and then let the print driver actually convert it to the CMYK. We talked about spot process or spot color printing versus process printing, and how that works. What is considered low resolution, essentially anything under 150 dpi, high resolution being 300 dpi and higher. Why you don't want to be scaling a bitmap. You can shrink, how actually shrinking the resolution can actually help converting a bitmap to a vector. And now I just would like you to kind of explain to us a little bit about Corel Trainer and what all you do. Last thing I just want to leave with everybody, the days of being able to buy a disc, those are way gone. I'm old school where I like something physical on top of it, even though my computer can't run it. But what I want to illustrate is you it's becoming more and more standard for all software to become a subscription model. And now with the Adobe Suite, you cannot buy a desktop version and use it on there, and that's means that you're going to be paying a monthly subscription, and it's not cheap. And the updates that come with the subscription are nice if you're a graphic designer. They're overkill for 99% of us shops and what we need the software to be able to do. So one thing I do like about Corel is that you can actually buy it, own it, and not have to keep paying for updates. Well, it may not update as much, David, but you don't need it at this point. I mean, we're in 2024. They've got it pretty far. And I mean, before you know it, I'm spending over $50 a month for Adobe, and that's 600 plus a year. What does CorelDRAW actually start out as, and can you use it on both a Mac and a PC? Because I know for a long time you could only use it on a PC.
Well, the first question you asked is how much is it? You could save $50 in that yearly cost with Adobe. Save $50 and you could own Corel outright. CorelDRAW is $549. Sometimes you'll see it on sale. They do offer it for PCs, which is primarily what people use it for. They do have Mac versions. In my opinion, sorry guys, I wouldn't get the Mac version. It's just not quite all there yet. They are working on it, but I would primarily use Corel on a PC. Now, I do know folks that love their Macs. Okay, I get it. You know, I'm an Apple iPhone guy. You can always remote into a PC and work on CorelDRAW if you insist on using a Mac. Um, but yeah, just pay the $549, own it outright. I'm not going to use the word problem because I like to replace that with the word challenge. The challenge with your software always updating, whether it's Corel or Adobe, is it's buggy. If you guys haven't noticed, whether it's your subscription version of Corel or your subscription version of Adobe, it's going to be buggy. There's always patches coming out. I kind of personally like to stay a version behind, but that's just my personal advice.
Well, and Dave, I'm very much so a Mac guy. I've been, for since I got into college, and I got my first MacBook Pro, and I'm like, okay, I'm Apple now. But here's the problem. None of these pieces of equipment that I need to use a vector with actually want to use a Mac. It doesn't matter if you want to be on a Mac if the Epilogue Laser or Cut Studio or really any of these programs only work on a PC. So it just so everybody knows where, it's still, the business world is still PC based. So, in my shop, wherever I can have a Mac, I have one. But guess what? I've got a PC at the DTG, the DTF, the vinyl cutter. They only will run off of them, really. So that's what you have to use. So there's
Yeah.
no problem there. And yeah, David, can you show us some things about CorelDRAW and what you can do with Corel Trainer? I'll let you
Yeah,
share.
so what we've been doing, we've been in the industry since, oh my gosh, I've been in the industry since 2006. Let me see here. Share screen.
And for those who don't know, this is DecoNetwork that's been behind me the whole time. Guess what? The first step of getting an order revolves around, David. Getting the artwork
Artwork,
ready. You can't
artwork.
decorate anything in which the artwork's not ready. And what's beautiful is you can, order your blank products and simultaneously get your artwork ready. And if you got the right tools, David, you'll beat the shirts from coming in. Even though they can get there in a day, guess what? You should be able to take the customer's artwork and get it ready before the shirts come, because speed is everything nowadays, especially with
Yeah.
Amazon. Amazon has said it so customers expect things so quick. And if you don't want artwork to be always your bottleneck that just prevents you from getting your customer what they need. So yeah, shows what you got.
Once again, bud, you took the words right out of my mouth. Artwork is the biggest bottleneck. We're not drawing from scratch. Clients don't pay for that. We are recreating. Most of my clients, I'd say half of them, work a full-time job. They're just starting out doing something, and you don't need to spend $30,000 to go to community college for graphic design just to come to this industry and say, oh, you know what, it's Corel based. Well, that was fun, right? So what we do is my workspace is a little bit differently. I did add it a darker background, and that's for the eyes. Always on the computers, save your eyes. I wear contacts, probably because of this reason. Corel Trainer adds a tab at the very top of your Corel Draw, which is essentially college for Corel. You learn at your own speed on your own computer at your own time. Don't think you have to set time away to do this. That's counterproductive. Learn as you go. But when you do have time, go through the A to Z in Corel Trainer. If you want to learn about menus, dockers, and categories, click on menus, dockers, and categories. It's going to open your class and you can play it right there on top of your Corel Draw. Another feature is we have automatic worksheets, which is super cool. It's kind of like your cheat sheet, Zach. Everybody learns differently. You know, some people might learn with videos, some people might learn with worksheets. Regardless, any artwork that's in that class that you selected is provided. So you are doing the same artwork that the instructor is as you go. It's kind of just the only way to learn. Doesn't make sense to use different file types, right? Next is learn by process. Don't learn about halftones or fills if you're not doing screen printing, but if you are digital printing, things like that, just really fine tune your skills and laser focus on what you need to do. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Then we have your 1 minute tips and tricks in CorelDRAW, which is kind of like your golden nuggets. Little over 100 of those. Tracing 1, 2, 3 is super important. This is your in-depth bitmap to vector tracing. It doesn't matter if you're doing a basic black and white, something with a bunch of colors, or something with a bunch of layers. We'll show you how to do it efficiently, so you're not wasting more time than you should. So next on my Corel Trainer tab is video shorts. Speaking of halftones, I'm inside Corel and I don't have a lot of time. Halftones looks like it's a recent search on our site. I want to learn how to do halftones. Bam, interactive fill tool. This is how you do it in less than 6 minutes. So each of those shorts here are your quick 4 to 6 minute answers. We have all the beginner courses you're ever going to need. We're talking about hundreds with an S. Same with the intermediate. Every workshop that we do is recorded. So you don't have to fly to Atlantic City to watch our workshop with the Magic Touch USA, or you get what I'm putting down there. You can watch those seminars whenever you guys want, comfort of your home and your jammies if you wish. Because artwork is super important and well, clip art is well, so 2005s, we added a smart search. You're not going to use a lot of clip art, but when you do, you need it now and you got to make sure it's royalty free. The smart search is a royalty free clip art search that we came out with for Corel. It's predefined. Whatever shows up, you are legally allowed to use. Okay, so that's pretty darn cool for on the fly type of stuff. Search Trainer library, kind of self-explanatory. That's going to search your tips and tricks, your 4 to 6 minute answers, your long 3 hour workshops, or just your hour seminars. Now, one big thing we really pride ourselves on is this Ask Trainer button. This is 2024, so if you get stuck, you can email support, you can call us, and you are reading that right, Zach. I don't know any other company in the industry that offers anytime text support. It's not just a 9 to 5 deal. If you get stuck, most of the time you're working on artwork, it's after hours, let's be honest. Take a picture with your cell phone, send it over via text, and ask how to remove a background, or how do I view in wireframe, whatever questions you guys have. So we really support you, essentially hold your hand as you're going through it, which is really cool. And if you wish, you can just connect with us at the top here. I know we are pressed for time, so I'm going to show you one little cool thing here called the Simple Designer that we came out with in January. This is super cool. I'm going to click New Template on my right side Docker. It's going to bring up a bunch of pre-made artwork that's in black and white vector, color vector, and digital. Okay, so I'm going to click on one of these, and right now there's over 200. I give you updates for free on top of this as well. But I mean, you're never going to use that the way it is, right? So instead of Chandler Construction, it's going to take you 45 minutes to change this to Phoenix Champions. Take that image out, put some type of ball in there. Let's go ahead and mess with this. On the right-hand side, you can swap it out to say whatever you want, and it'll keep the same fonts, curves, envelopes, everything. And we said champions, right? That looks cool, but that's not very sports theme, is it? Click, replace, clip art. Now you can add your own artwork in these folders. So you can use your own artwork as well with this, which is really, really rare. Let's do a ball, whatever image you pick, it will automatically size it and it'll place it into your artwork the exact size as the previous image. That's a little too much red for me, so I'm going to drag some basketball orange. I'm going to rescan page on my right-hand side. It shows me use colors and available colors. The available colors are truthfully any color you have in CorelDRAW. Normally, to change all that red to orange, you're zooming in, zooming out, dragging and dropping. Not anymore. I want all that CMYK. We're just talking about Pantone. Replace, and it's going to do everything for me at once. So that's super easy. Now I can add a vector distressed overlay, and we're always adding more here too, to the entire image, or I can select just a certain aspect to power clip it. Power clipping is taking whatever you want and fitting it inside without it bleeding over. So don't have to be a graphic designer to do this stuff. But people want to know what it looks like on a product. Let's be honest here. Show on product, bottom right side, and you can show it on hundreds of shirts, hats, mugs, jerseys. These are high definition product blanks, or high resolution, if you will. If you hold down Control, you can select multiple products at once as well. Let go of Control, open. It's going to place your artwork on your products. Then last but not least, you can scroll down to make proposal, and I do give you some custom order forms. Once again, same thing, you can add as many as you want, delete or edit them however you want to. But you just did a custom proposal in less than 5 minutes. Once again, if you're not getting paid for your art, it's a really good tool to have. So not only do we give you an easy button to just get you going right off the bat, but primarily we teach you how to do everything with the Corel Trainer. There's nothing that I just did that CorelDRAW does not do by itself. We just saved you about 90 steps doing it. So we'll teach you, we'll give you the easy button, and we support you anytime. And just a heads up, if you have any questions about it, I wouldn't reach out to me, reach out to our sales at sales@CorelTRAINER.com, or you can call 928-797-8878 for any questions you guys have.
And David, it's CorelTRAINER.com, you said?
CorelTRAINER.com, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, everybody, hopefully this all has been very helpful. Again, in our industry, I don't care if you're just getting started or you've been in the game for decades, artwork will be the biggest hurdle for every order. And thus, you need to have the right tools to get it ready as quickly as possible and correctly. And having the right tool in the tool belt will help you. You can illustrate, Adobe, nothing wrong with it. Just a much higher learning curve, much more expensive. CorelDRAW, simpler, but still has its own learning curve, and you have great support tools and resources out there like Corel Trainer, who can drastically help reduce that learning curve and get you, at where you need to be as quickly as possible, so you can focus and take your business to wherever you need it to go. Because David, I mean, gosh, artwork will always be the biggest challenge. And it doesn't matter. There will never be a day when we actually get vector files from our customers.
Just won't.
Never.
Don't hold
And
your breath.
and even like what you were doing there at the end with the smart designer, um,
Simple designer.
businesses, yeah, businesses have logos, schools have logos, but then you always have that coach who has to have something different, and having those tools like you showed, and even just how easy that was to apply that distressed effect. I could tell you in Illustrator, it's not that easy.
Not that easy. No,
It's
no.
not that easy at all. Thank you so much, David. Again, check out CorelTRAINER.com to learn more about what all David and Corel Trainer has to offer. Thanks,
You're
Dave, for
amazing,
your time.
Zach. Thank you for yours.